with your waste in the future, not just what to do with the fire today. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So anyway, on the agenda today, I've got about 11 or 12 topics, and I always believe in talking to lots of pictures. And so that's what I'll do today, give you a sort of a snapshot of what I've seen in the last couple of days and what I've learned from talking to a lot of people. And so we're going to look at the site, we're going to look at the climate, because I find fires are often really affected by climate. We're going to look at landfill fire activity that's occurred to date, and then some of the environmental impacts and risks that we're facing. I'll then present some of the landfill fire control strategies and recommend what I think would be the most appropriate. And then I'll advise on how to implement that. I believe, I'm really glad there's a lot of people from the community here, because you know, we're going to need to be partners in this big bit. I know you guys have been getting smoked out, and it's really unfortunate that that's what happens when you get a major fire. And I think the thing to do is there is a need to get onto it, put it out, and there will be some short-term pain for long-term gain as we, you know, if we go ahead and advance with the firefight, because you need to basically open things up and to get them extinguished, because there's a lot of fire underground right now. So that's the community awareness piece. Health and safety. Luckily, I've never killed anybody on a project yet, although we've had situations where we've come close. Landfill firefighting is very dangerous, and I'm a little bit concerned about this project because, to tell you the truth, you know, the steep slopes that we have here are going to make for an extremely dangerous project, and the people that are going to be working on that, you know, we're going to do our best to keep them safe, but it is, unfortunately, it is the way it is, and it's going to make it especially challenging to deal with it as a result. Cost estimate, I'm not going to, you know, kid you guys that this is a serious problem, that in order to put it out, it's going to take some serious money, and I think that'll be one of the challenges, you know, that your mayor and council are dealing with is how to come up with the financial resources to actually attack this fire, because unfortunately there's going to be a lot of heavy equipment needed, and a lot of firefighter support needed to keep those people safe, and that's going to unfortunately cost, you know, a fair chunk of change. So then we'll talk about monitoring. Now, I'm going to tell you that your landfill is beyond capacity and it needs to be closed. That it just taking it higher is, you know, putting people's lives at risk, and so I definitely do not recommend, you know, you continue to operate that facility, especially while it's on fire and while the fire is being put out. And so trying to figure out something else that's going to happen with the trash is going to be an ongoing challenge. But you know, I don't know what other resources are available, but I understand your mayor has again been exploring some alternate options for setting up a temporary storage site, and that is something that's probably going to be necessary to make this thing happen. And then we're going to basically spend a few minutes talking about waste management into the future. Okay, so this is a photograph, a drone photograph provided by Tim Jackson. I imagine that's a few days after the fire started, and I'm going to take a little bit of compass bearing Liberty, and I'm going to call this the north side of the landfill. I'm going to call this the east side, this the south side, not the west side. I know that the north is kind of awkward, but to keep things simple, that's the way I'm going to refer it. But basically what I understand, the prevailing direction is kind of in that direction, and so everybody in this area, you know, is feeling the brunt and unfortunate impacts of the smoke, and that's really super sad. That's kind of I feel really blurred. Basically, here's the landfill, and you can see there's quite a lot of communities, including some nice businesses like Solimar Resort here, and I imagine a few others. Along the way here, there's a school that I drove past, and lots of homes, right? And everybody here is in the brunt of the smoke, and that's a concerning thing. Now, my understanding is that the site has been used for many years. There's been a history of landfill fires here. 2013, 2016 have been published on the web. And I just recently talked to one of the staff of the resort here who was sort of complaining about the smoke impacts in her life. And I understand there was a fire last year as well that took 3 months before it was fully extinguished. So, you know, and this is unfortunately the reality of landfills in the Caribbean, that due to a lack of soil cover, that a lot of them have the same problem. I'm just involved in the Bahamas on a project, and you know, they have a massive landfill fire almost every year, and spend massive amounts of money to put it out, and it's just that they're not doing a good job of landfill operation. So they've actually asked my company to help them take over the landfill operation moving forward. Now, your landfill, basically, as I mentioned, the capacity, beyond capacity, and the slopes are like crazy steep, okay? Like, I'll tell you, like in British Columbia, where I'm from, we're not allowed to build slopes steeper than 33%, right? And your slopes are almost 3 times as steep, right? Like landfill should never have been built that steep. It's impossible to close a landfill that's this steep. And so we're gonna have to flatten out those slopes in order to make them stable and make them closable. Okay, so in my experience, anything steeper than 40% physically cannot be closed. Like the geotechnical constraints, it cannot be done. Okay, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. And then, I don't know the exact number, maybe a lot of you do. You know, I guesstimate looking at all the people running around, there's 100 or so scavengers, what I would call scavengers or pickers. And these people live a really hard life, right? Man, if you feel you've got a bad day, put yourself in their shoes. And I think we have a responsibility to them as well, you know, to try and basically give them a somewhat life that's not, you know, in the worst possible condition with respect to their health. So that's a concern as well. Now, waste generation, I did a little bit of research on the web, and basically the population of like roughly 95 tons a day of solid waste being generated right now. And I read it again on the web that in 2013, the mayor of the town estimated that the waste generation was about 80 tons per day. So I think we're kind of in the right ballpark. Oops, sorry. Where was I? A couple slides back. And so I estimate that the annual tonnage is about 35,000. And based on typical garbage density, we need about 45,000 cubic meters of airspace, basically every year moving forward. And so, you know, even if your landfill isn't right at capacity right now, which I think it is, in another year definitely would be. So, like, there is an immediate need for a new facility somewhere. Okay?
Generation.
Well, I have tried to factor in a little bit of tourist numbers as well, but I've also looked at the, you know, the overall volume that's being consumed, right? And I think this number is pretty close. Like, I think what's happening, and this is another sad thing, like you drive around the island, and, you know, I'm staying at the resort here, and you see all these little piles of smoke going up in the air every morning, right? Like, people are burning their garbage. And that's awful, right? Like, that causes terrible air quality, dioxins, all sorts of stuff. They're burning plastic. You know, like, people are killing themselves doing this. And you really need to educate the local islanders here who are doing that, because it's really bad for the environment. Okay? So anyway, this is the landfill as it was just shortly before the fire. This is the, I guess, the Mudhole Road. There's a bit of a ramp that takes you up to the top, and these are the crazy steep slopes. Over here, there's a little bit of an inlet that goes through the forest, through the mangrove groves, almost right up to the landfill. It's not quite visible in the picture. Okay, so that's what we had. Looking up high, again, I mentioned just for orientation sakes, this is the north side. There's that inlet I talked about, the bay, and then the west, east, and south. Now, I was told that the fire kind of broke out somewhere in here, and if somebody actually knew more exactly and could tell me, that'd be really useful for me. I'm sort of estimating it was somewhere in this area, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm right. Anybody know?
The scavenger program was in the west.
The first one was on the east side.
Yeah, the very first one,
The very first one was on the
2013,
east side.
on the
In
east side.
2013, and then it moved to the west and then to the north now. So the one, the flare that we have recently is from the north side.
Right.
Yeah.
But, so what's happening right now, there's fire burning here, there's fire all along here, there's a lot of fire all along here, and it's starting to move this way, right? Now with the prevailing wind kind of blowing in this direction, what I always find is the fire migrates downwind. So like I assume it must have, you know, would have started here and moved all the way around, and now it's here. But basically,
Sir, if I could I walked the site 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, and there was fire on the west side. From the bottom of that ring road on the bottom there, just by where your thing, right down to the bottom of that, and midway up the side of the pile, there was a hot spot layer of about 6 inches or so.
Right.
And that's when we decided we talked about making sure that garbage didn't get continued piled up on the west side,
Yeah.
so that it didn't create anything further
Right.
to the west.
Right, yeah, there's definitely fire up here. Tim and I were on the site, we were actually standing right here, could see the smoke coming right out. Like I say, basically the whole three sides of the landfill now are involved, there's fires everywhere, right? So anyway, meters by 100 meters, almost exactly. And I kind of used my high school university trigonometry, and I was amazed that I could remembered all this stuff and determined that it's about 13 meters high, which is roughly 40 feet. Okay, the slopes, as I measured, again, crazy steep, 75 to 85%. And the total airspace volume, like a rough order of magnitude calculation, then there's about 222,000 cubic meters of airspace. That's fun. Remember the old show Room 222, all of a sudden that sort of reminded me. That dates me from way back. Anyway, here we are. So this is a hand-drawn cross-section, nothing fancy. I did this in my book in the hotel room. But basically, the dashed line represents what we have right now. Okay, very steep slope towards the mangrove, and then a flat top, a bit of a ramp, and then a vertical cliff beside the wall here. Okay. Now, what I sketched is that operationally, to be safe, you need a minimum of about 30 meters of working area on the landfill crest. You can't really take landfills any higher than about 30 meters, or you start having risks of trucks going off the edge. Okay, so that basically constrains how high the landfill can get. And basically, what I, again, indicate that in order to stabilize this thing, we gotta make the slopes flatter. And I feel it's not going to be very practical to try and dig the material up and put it out. I'm recommending that we basically push it out a little bit, which would be much, much safer to do. And that's what we're basically proposing, is to excavate the upper portion of the landfill, compact it down in here, and create a buttress and cap the landfill. And similarly on this side, again, cut the slope down, place the excavated material, which is not on fire here, on top for a nice dome so we can shed rainwater. And that's what I'm proposing be the final geometry. Okay? So that this landfill will be pretty well maxed out, but it can still be nicely covered and put to bed. Okay? And I'll show you some examples of what that should look like. So as I mentioned, there are mangroves, and these are very important for your environment, for your ecology. So as much as possible, we want to preserve those. But the reality is that up along the road, there's Tim with me. I didn't want to do this work by myself, so I'm very thankful that he came along for the day. And it was amazing. We were wading through, slimy, black, grease stuff all through here, infested with all sorts of bugs. So I hope it doesn't get sick, and I hope I don't get sick, but it was kind of gross in there. But basically, you can see here, all these trees are dead.
Fire did that.
Sorry?
Fire did that. There was a fire.
Yes.
Fire.
Yeah. Imagine bug got very hot and basically toasted those trees near the perimeter. And you can see also the rubble here is actually a big chunk of the debris has fallen off and now collapsed. And there's actually a massive risk of that ongoing, like I'll show you a little later on. And this is probably something super important to be aware of. The edges of this landfill are crazy dangerous right now, and I don't think the pickers or some of the operators are really aware of that. And so it's important that they inform otherwise. So now this is your typical waste content here. I notice there's a lot of organic material. There's a lot of salads, all sorts of organic matter coming into this landfill. The cardboard, and there's a lot of palm debris, right? Like your yard clearing type of material. So this landfill contains a huge amount of organics. Now, I can tell you, the simplest way to manage organics and reduce your problem probably by 50% is to establish a simple composting operation, right? Really low tech. Maybe you can even put some of those people that are picking the bottles to actually work there and help in the composting operation. And that would be a really cool environmental thing to do. Okay? But in general, the waste material here seems to be a lot more organic than what I was before that, given the collapse of the recycling markets as a result of the ban of Chinese imports of contaminated recyclables. I'm not sure whether that's gonna be sustainable in the long term. Certainly in North America, a lot of recycling programs are collapsing right now, and I'm not sure if that's the case here as well. So hopefully not, but I'm very concerned that that may be a problem with their market, for the plastic maybe drying up. Now, climate data, real quick. I was really tough to get good climate data, but I think I tracked some down. And so what I'm seeing is that this area is moderate rainfall, 1.3 meters. That to me is a moderate rainfall area. And the wet months are October and November. Wind is pretty consistent, and temperature is very mild and beautiful here. No wonder you guys all like it here. I like it too. So.
Wait, Tony. 1.3 meters? We got more like 8 feet now.
What 1.3 meters is maybe about 5 feet.
No, that's millimeters per year.
Yeah, yes.
7 feet.
This is your data from the airport, like Roatan International Airport, and I diligently added up every column, and that's what I came up with.
I think it's low, just having looked at it.
Okay, well, more water is good,
Yeah.
but like the rainfall's not that critical. It's actually more the wind direction. And tell me if that's, this is what I'm seeing is predominantly, blowing out of the northeast to northeast for most of the time. Seems like with a little bit of very light wind in the other general direction.
2 days, you're gonna see the other.
Yeah, you're gonna see it.
In 2 days, you're gonna see the other direction.
Yeah. Right. So I guess every now and then it'll change and the smoke will go the other way, right? But for firefighting reasons and for tactics, one of the things that'll be really important every day when we deal with it, we gotta know exactly which way the wind's gonna be blowing, because I gotta always keep my guys upwind of the smoke, right? To keep them
Well,
safe.
prevailing trades are southeast
Yeah.
and east, not
Beautiful.
northeast, yeah.
So-
Prevailing trade, yeah,
Okay.
the wind trades
Are
are
from the southeast?
southeast
Okay.
and sometimes east, straight east, but
Okay.
it's not typically northeast.
Okay.
Northeast is more a storm.
Yeah, that's when the big storms come out, eh? Okay. Sounds good. So, just from the fire history, as far as I can tell, the fire originally started up in the southeast corner. Wind's been pushing the fire all around the landfill. The latest fire, basically 2018 fire, the bomb barrels were up top the next day trying to put it out, but you can't put stuff out on a vertical cliff. And so they contained it on the top, but it kept burning on the sides. I see evidence of basically complete burnovers. I'll show you some of the pictures later on. And the fire's now been burning close to a month. And as a result, what's happening now is what we call in the business worming, digging wormholes into the waste mass and kind of creating cavities and digging deeper into the fill. Okay? So here's a picture of the bomberos basically trying to put this thing out. One of the things I always dread is, when I see firefighters responding to a fire without any respiratory protection, that's like really bad. And these people, need to be protected. They need to be wearing respirators when they're in the smoke. And similarly, the pictures should be provided with them as well. Now, this is a photograph again of those super steep slopes. And whoops, sorry, you'll note here, there's smoke coming out here, smoke coming out here, lots of smoke coming out here. And typically where we see most of the fire occurring is kind of near the crash in this area here. One of the key site constraints is there's sort of a big culvert. I imagine that when it's really rainy, there's a big creek that flows along the edge of the landfill here. And there we're now on the backside of the landfill, and you can see basically again the steep having a cliff of garbage ready to fall down. Some of it already has. Here, I wasn't quite sure what was going on. There was this very active fire, where the stuff was burning red hot. And I imagine there may be some methane kind of venting out of the ground here, sort of feeding us like an oversized barbecue. I'm not quite sure. I didn't want to spend any time climbing underneath without believing this thing could fall out of place. Wherever you see red or white, it's basically a signature of a little combustion going on. So with the infrared cameras, we're able to see where the fires are, and then focus on digging out, putting them out. And this is what it looks like in real spectrum. And again, you can see some of the areas where the burning is occurring. And again, dead vegetation, very steep slopes. And all this stuff is ash and metal. You know, this thing's been really burnt over, there's nothing left, it's flammable, it's all been burnt up. Okay, on the, I guess the west side, what we call it the west side here, you can see in the background, we've got lots of fireworks, lots of fire going on, and up at the top here as well. And again, close to collapsing, and we're measuring the temperatures here, and seeing basically, again, fire now starting to break out through the surface of the landfill. And we're starting to see venting now. If this opens up, you can get a lot more aggressive compression, and could actually lose control of this. So letting stuff smolder is not a good thing. Okay, so what are the environmental risks? So the biggest one is smoke. Okay, like when you burn trash in the old days when it was all wood and paper, it wasn't that bad. But now that we rely on plastics, it's really bad. Okay, like when you combust plastic in a low oxygen environment, you produce all sorts of nasties. You produce carbon monoxide, you produce hydrogen cyanide, you produce particulate matter at all sorts of levels. You get benzene, you get pyroxene. Get these things that are really hard to detect, but they're generally present, which are called dioxins and furans. And these are very low concentrations, but they're also very toxic. They're kind of like PCBs. And so basically, in close proximity to landfill, you can expect a halo of this material basically being deposited, and it's not healthy. Okay. Now, I measured carbon monoxide levels just in this dispersed smoke at about 110 ppm maximum. And so this is sort of an area where we're going to start getting headaches in a couple hours. And it's well above the recommended 8-hour exposure of 35 ppm. And when you get really thick smoke, it's going to be 200-300 ppm. And right at wherever the smoke's coming out, it's going to be 10,000 ppm CO. Okay, so that's the reality. These smoldering fires produce a lot of carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide breathed in close is not healthy. So the smoke is the biggest risk. The second risk I'm concerned about is basically slope collapse. Okay, so especially if somebody's up on top of landfill, it looks kind of safe, they walk to the edge, and this whole thing lets go, somebody could get killed very easily. And so I think we need to take some precautions to keep people back from the crest, ideally shut the whole thing down. Now, just to illustrate to you, again, people are probably not aware of this, but you notice this linear feature here? Basically, that's a tension crack, and what's happened is, because all of this material has been combusted down below, this thing's starting to collapse now and basically settle, and at some point it's just going to give way, and this whole thing's going to kind of start tumbling down.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
On that fracture, how much of all of that is also being contributed to how many gallons per minute are being put onto that? Because of the areas in below, as you're saying, where the fire is worming, water's going to follow the same areas. And reading the article that Steve posted, which was about the Delta fire, the Delta landfill fire, the biggest thing on that was sinkholes being created throughout it. From the amount of water. So could the fracturing that's happening also be accelerated by pouring more water on it by firefighting efforts at this point in the way that they're doing it?
Yeah, so I can't really comment on, I haven't seen what they have been doing, my information is...
Just by what you saw with those guys on the hose, and you demonstrated in your picture, just pouring water onto the surface, and that's basically how they've been attacking it as they see it at the surface and getting the combustibles at that point.
Yeah. In general, the amount of water that's been deployed, 5,000 gallons is or the numbers I've heard is insignificant. That's like a couple truckloads, right?
Well, yeah, but except the one day I know that they were using their deck gun, and their deck gun is 250 to 500 gallons a minute.
No, it's not the rate, it's the total volume.
Yeah.
They're just shoving water. It's when you are pumping 1,500 gallons a minute for 3-4 days in a row that you have to start worrying about slow
Okay, so that's when it's going to make more of an
impact. Yeah, and that's a big concern. Anytime you load a landfill, there have been landfill failures where people have been buried by just putting too much weight from the water, and it creates a mudslide, right? And people have been subsurface fire there. And we're basically trying to create a fire break because the fire is occurring in this area here. And we took a coffee break, and when we came back 15 minutes later, we actually had what's happening out there. and how quickly it sort of starts to accelerate. And so once you get there into the Roatan Trail, the fire can start very, very quickly. And so we're scrambling now to get there. So I put a fire break in there, so we don't start with that less than that for like 5 years with flash. So I'm trying to keep my foot there. See, sort of like grew over very, very quickly. Like that happened within 5 minutes, and then from nothing to anything further. Once it gets there, the garbage will start burning quickly. Now, this is an image Tim and I took on Roatan Landfill. I was just kind of curious about what's happening under these smokers. So I grabbed a stick and I started poking around. And this is just a video of me doing that. So bear with me, it'll take a few seconds to kind of work through this. I'm just kind of scraping stuff away. You can see it's all mostly ash now, all burnt over, but there's still something going on below the surface. And so I was curious what would that look like. So unfortunately, didn't have a pick or shovel, but because that was a lot quicker. Pretty primitive here. Oh, very hot. Pay attention here, this gets quite interesting. Very hot. It's all charcoal that's kind of found, and that's what's causing all the smoke. See, this is what I'm really worried about, right? Like, right now, we basically have a lot of, what we're making is charcoal, that basically with limited oxygen, all that organic matter is kind of smoldering away, turning into charcoal. That's how you make charcoal, right? Under a basic combustion order. And it's getting really hot in there, and so once you open it up, you can basically get explosive, CO alarm will not. And so that's the issue, right? So now how are we going to put this thing out? So over the years, it's kind of evolved. It used to be that I would come in and say, okay, we're going to put this out. We're going to achieve extinguishment, right? But there's a lot of steps that need to go first. And I learned that first you got to think about health and safety. Okay, that's job one. And then you got to get control. And by control, I mean start creating a safe workplace where there's not a lot of smoke going on, and then you figure out how to put the fire out. Okay? And then lastly, you conduct monitoring to make sure it stays out. So health and safety, you got to think about respiratory protection, you got to think about steep slopes, you got to think about collapse hazards, equipment safety, the flashover situation. You can imagine, instead of a little pickaxe, we were digging with an excavator into a big pocket. You can imagine that flashover would be a whole lot bigger. Heat stress and decontamination. Now, this is the level of respiratory protection I usually wear on fires. I found that, SCBA is like just, it slows you down so much that you can't be productive. In most instances, these really good filters, that have about 4,000 different filters inside them, will provide you adequate protection for most stuff, except carbon monoxide. And so if you get into high levels of CO, you have to back out of the workspace until the CO dissipates. The other option is to go into Scott Air Packs, but that's just, you've got to change out bottles every 30 minutes, take breaks. It's not a very efficient way to fight landfill fires.
And in this heat, you're gonna wear your crew out, and you better have a lot of people involved.
Totally. That's just the reality. And here's a list of rollovers. That's actually me standing up there.
That's why Jerry doesn't buy us new cars.
I had a bad feeling something was going on, and as I was walking up, these guys were waving this truck back and back. I go, stop! Too late. It went over the edge. Rushing back out of down the road, able to get out the way. So and the driver bailed out just before the truck came over the edge. So That's what I said about, coming close to killing people, that sort of thing can have flashovers, basically the excavator exposes a lot of hot charcoal and basically just explodes in flame. And that can happen. And that's why it's really important to wear proper PPE. And in most cases, we end up wearing Nomex overalls because we find the bunkering gear, long-term operations is just way too hot. Here, people would die of heat stress wearing it, so we're going to have to be very careful, but probably wear flame-resistant overalls. Now, to establish control, the first thing I do is a drone survey to get a good map of the site, so we can do good engineering design, figure out how the slope should be shaped, and then basically cover the whole crest of the landfill with 300 millimeters of dirt after we do the regrade, and then put in a perimeter access road all the way around the landfill so we can access well, and put in that containment road. So that would be my first steps. And then we move into containment. Okay, so what we want to do in containment is make sure the fire won't spread, establish fire breaks, suppress the fire to stop active combustion, and then prevent emissions of smoke. And basically when we do that, I recognize there'll still be some pockets of burning going on, but we'll get those in the long run. Okay, so to get containment, I basically have three big tools. We can do oxygen suppression, water application, or overhaul. These are three landfill firefighting techniques. Okay, so this summer, late June, I was basically involved in Whitehorse. After getting off a big fire job in Vancouver landfills, I was there nonstop for 3 weeks. Next day, I got a call to go out to Whitehorse. And so I showed up there, and they had a mess. They had like 3 or 4 days this landfill was on fire. Very similar to what you guys have, same size, fully involved. They were digging into it with the excavator, spraying water like crazy, and the fire was getting bigger and bigger. Okay, so guys, we got to rethink the game plan, and basically we mapped it out and found some real hot spots. Again, when it goes less than 40, it means it's over 400 degrees Celsius, and we had the fire really deep. And basically what I did is I just buried the whole thing with garbage, and I used the dozer to smother everything down. And then once we got it nicely compacted, we knocked down the smoke by 90%. And then we basically buried the whole landfill with 2 feet of clay, and worked all night, worked all day. And by midday next day, we had the fire completely extinguished. And the brass were really happy. Doing a big news conference, and I was kind of asleep there at the table. But that was my best fire success story ever, to put out landfill fire in 1 day. And I was really proud of that one. This is a news clip from Panama. This is the Cerro Panacon landfill. It's the biggest fire I've ever worked. And it's basically maybe 10 times bigger than what you guys have around here. And that's essentially what I call containing the fire. Okay? Once you have that done, basically there's virtually no smoke coming out. You kind of buttoned everything up, and then you can kind of take your time, to put it out. Okay? This is basically the other toolbox. That was basically oxygen suppression. This illustrates water application. This is what we'll do. If we have a near surface fire, water bomb it with off-road trucks. Create what I call mud pie. We stir around the burning material, create a big mud pie out of it, and that is really good at extinguishing. Sometimes we'll use foam application, and that helps get better penetration of the water, helps to put the fire out. Okay? When we get into the third method, that's called the overhaul, and in this case, we'll actually dig up the burning material, take it to a laydown area, and then foam it on the laydown area, and then stockpile the extinguishing material. And that can be done in one of 2 ways. That was what I call the hot pan approach, and this is what's called the quenching trench. This is what we did up in the Cali with Hellfire. We basically dug a big trench right, and then basically just dug right through. The trench kind of moved right through the fire. The cold stuff went on the back, the hot stuff was on the front, and everything got mixed in, and we were able to put that fire out. Now, those are basically the 3 tools. Again, oxygen suppression, water application, or overhaul. Okay? Now, your situation, your geography, your lack of real estate, I can't basically say any of those 3 will work effectively. We got to do a bit of a hybrid. Okay? So what I think is necessary here is we got to cut the slopes back and kind of try and cool things as we go, and then try and extinguish as much in situ cast the extinguishing material down the slope, create a bit of a berm down below, build up on a 2.5 to 1 slope, and then bury it with soil. Okay, so it's gonna be a lot easier to explain that here in this graphic. And so, again, this is my 78% slope right now. And so what I'm saying is, we're gonna put an excavator up here, some firefighters cooling this material down, mixing it over, and then basically casting it over the bank. Okay, down here, I'm gonna have a dozer, essentially, and an excavator smoothing this material out and compacting it down to a nice 2.5 to 1 grade. And then we're gonna cut a bench in here that a machine can sit on, and so we'll be able to apply good soil cover, both on this upper slope and on this lower slope. Okay, so at the end of the day, our profile is gonna look like this. It's gonna require about an 11-meter push-out at the landfill toe. Okay. These are just some examples. The first thing I wanna do is fly a drone survey to get the exact geometry so we can make sure we design it right. And then we'll put an excavator on the top, start digging into the dirt material, cooling it down, mixing it up and throwing it over the edge. Once we've got the grade we want, where we're gonna bring in dirt and cap it. Okay, with a couple feet, 2 or 3 feet of compacted clay. And basically, once we've got containment, then we're gonna find if there's any other hot spots burning, and we'll either smother them or dig them out. That'll be a call, we'll see. So this is just an example in Cerro Patacon again, where we covered everything with soil, and now we're digging up the remaining hot spots, extinguish them in situ, and stuffing those holes full of dirt. Okay, so that's basically the strategy. Now you guys, I imagine many of you live right in this area and are really concerned about lots of smoke being generated. But we'll basically be trying to put get the fire out, get this problem over as quick as possible. And so, I recognize acute respiratory impacts for people with chemical sensitivity. I live with my wife who one cigarette smoker across the street, and she's got asthma and exposure to gasoline, and she's internally bleeding. Right? Like there are people that are acutely sensitive to things like volatile organics in the air, and those are the people that are really hurting right now. Okay? Long-term exposure to these things will cause chronic risk of cancer. And the biggest risk of that is right on the immediate landfill. When you're a kilometer downstream, product pollution really reduces that risk. So I don't think it's really acute, but for those scavengers who are up there on the landfill, I would really worry about their health long term, but that's not right. Now, there's also business, right? It's severely impacted, I imagine, Solimar. They did it right in the smoke plume, and I understand we lost a lot of cruise ship business, and again, really sad situation. There's some people that I understand have moved out from their homes because they can't handle the smoke. There's other bed and breakfast owners who've had to relocate at their own expense, people. So it's a really sad story here, and I think we need to figure out how to put this fire out. Now, I'm using my model for the Iqaluit landfill, which is very similar to this project here, and basically, given the geometry and the amount of earth moving that I think has to happen, I basically estimated that we're looking into a $3.5 million project, and that's basically broken out into heavy equipment, which I assume would be produced and supplied by the municipality. Now, I've budgeted to bring the guys I usually work with on the firefights as Hellfire. They're in my mind top landfill fire company in firefighting company in North America, but they're not super cheap. And if the local bomberos can provide the support, we may be able to save like $700,000, $800,000. I don't know, right? But I also find that a lot of times when I get on job sites, the fire chief will say, like our job is to protect the homes. We don't have the resources, so I don't know what the situation here is. Like the mayor here, he's gonna have to sort of provide a little guidance on that issue. I'd like to basically hope that we get engaged in working with the fire chief on taking incident command on the job to help you guys put this out. And so we're looking for $2 million of labor, and then all the pumps, the hose, the foam, so those are the estimated disbursements. Okay, so that's my estimate. The last job I estimated for Iqaluit came in within $100,000 of my estimate. So, I'm not going to tell you this is going to be cheap, right? Like it isn't. And that's kind of the reality. In my report, I share the assumptions, the hourly rates, the number of hours per day, and then I estimate the days, so, basically got, 6 firefighter guys, me as a subject matter expert, one of my guys, and then a couple of more barrels here, and then security people, logistic people, that's the kind of resources that we need. Okay, here's the equipment, we've got an off-road truck, a quad, a bunch of, self-breathing apparatus that we want for rescue. We've got all of, fire and water tanners, the hose, and, basically filters, respirators, gas analyzers, safety supplies. Right, so we're basically consuming.
Straker's still in business.
Oh yeah, they're one of the leading companies in respiratory. Yeah, they're very big. So now let's talk about closure. This is an example of a landfill closure using a clay cap. And one of the things you have to do is manage the methane that's produced in your landfill. I'm sure there's lots of methane being produced. And you want to collect that in water and then ideally flare it off so we don't create global warming or help create global warming. Methane is a really bad greenhouse gas. Okay, so instead of venting it to the atmosphere, what we normally do is actually collect the gas and then flare it off. This is an example of a landfill closure we did in Preston. And this is how the landfill looks, and this is how I imagine your landfill should look, once this work is done. Right? Not the nice, well, you do have nice trees all around, just a little bit. Instead of coniferous trees, you have palms. But basically, that's the gist. And what we've done at this landfill, we collect all the gas now, we actually flare it. That's the landfill flare in the distance right there. The same thing could be done at your site. So that brings me almost to the end. What do you do long term? Okay. So I believe the waste has to be diverted. Offsite is a priority. The new landfills are urgently required, or a waste energy system, right? Now I understand there's a 76-acre property fairly close by, up the road that's nicely contained, quite a bit away from the ocean. So at first glance, it appears to be a much better location. I think there's a need for some good engineering on that to determine the suitability. And if you're interested in our company that has that capacity, as landfill design engineers to do that assessment for the municipality. Liner and leachate treatment should be considered. That's the way things are done nowadays. You don't just create an open dump. And also, what's really important for fire suppression down the road, or prevention, fire prevention, I should say, is that the garbage is covered with soil on a daily basis. Okay, that's if you were doing that from day one, you would not be where you are today. Okay? I was on with Don Wheel, that was a little late today, is doing an assessment of that area and looking if it's suitable. And basically the property sits sort of in this general area right here. Here's the existing landfill. And basically it's much more contained and also not close to the ocean and would have much better buffer planning. You could operate a much safer facility in that location. Okay, when you do build landfills nowadays, it's really important that you put in the lining systems. There's some examples of kind of lining deployment in different areas. And now one other option that I became aware of, there is a landfill that was built way up to the east at Punta Brava, and it's fully lined but has never been in use. Now, unfortunately, again, I'm not old, I don't know the roads. I'm told, in the winter, that the roads are pretty rough, and it will all be quite expensive when you look long term. Well, trucking garbage, about 3 hours round trip, that would add cost to your operation. So, what I'm recommending that economic analysis be done to look at the two options and make a determination on what was the safest, most pragmatic thing to do. From my gut feeling is, when you build a transfer station, like the one they illustrated here, that's what you'd have to do. It would make sense to send every garbage truck, every car, all the way up to the landfill. So you get a transfer station like this, and then big trucks like this to haul the garbage up there. That would cost money. And so it's a balancing act. It's better to do a new landfill here or a landfill there. Would the other community even consider it? I don't know. Those are questions that I think should be addressed. My sort of gut feeling is local is probably better, but I think it's worth assessing that. Now, the other part of it, as I mentioned before, 60% of your stuff's organics, and this is a very simple, low-tech composting operation called the Core system. That's what British Columbia is mostly going to now. And what you do is basically shred the organic waste, grind it all up, put it in a windrow, cover it with a geomembranes, kind of like your Gore-Tex jackets. It allows the air to breathe, but keeps the moisture in. And, you know, within 2 or 3 months, the stuff's totally stabilized, beautiful soil. You can put it in your garden. And, you know, I think that's the way of the future for your island. And that's basically my presentation. This is last night's sunset.